So for this exercise, we're going to look at strengthening the hip flexors, or at least activating the hip flexors. Now the hip flexors get quite a bad rap because they're quite commonly associated with back pain or quite a lot of the problems that people have in modern day. And I'm one of the people that perpetuates this myth that they're a problem area. It's like everything else, everything in balance, everything in moderation. And the problem is that the hip flexors tend to be overly tight in a lot of people. And the reason for that is because we just sit all the time. So we're sitting in a position where the hip is flexed, and therefore the hip flexor, which is in here and causes this elevation, becomes shortened. And because we're sitting in that position for prolonged periods of time, it becomes shortened over time into that position naturally, and now you've got a tightness that then pulls through and can pull on the lower back, and because of that we end up with back pain, which a lot of people then associate with weak back muscles and start trying to strengthen their back, and that causes even more problems. So it can cause issues that most people are not aware of, and that's not great. However, in order to try and alleviate such problems, what most people end up doing is just stretching. That's all anybody does, is they're constantly trying to stretch the hip flexors. Now, if it's severely tight and it's cold, when you try and go and stretch it, you're not going to do very much. And the main thing with that is that the hip flexor muscle or the hip flexor area is incredibly tight, it's incredibly thick, it's incredibly strong, and so your stretching is going to do a little bit, but it's not going to do a whole lot on its own. If you do it repetitively, obviously you're sitting in that open position through the stretching, and that's great. But in order to try and activate this area and try and stimulate blood flow through it, it's useful to actually try and activate the muscle. Now, on the flip side of that, if you've got weak hip flexors, which some people do, then strengthening them is obviously a good idea. A good indicator of whether or not you've got weak hip flexors is based on the sort of cross formation across the hip area. Do you have a very flat lower back, or do you have a very curved and pronounced curve in your lower back? If it's very flat, then there's a good chance that your hip flexors are not pulling hard enough in that direction. Your hamstrings are taking over and it's flattened everything out. And that's not good either. And that, in such instances, you're going to look to try and have to strengthen your hip flexors. So this exercise would work towards that anyway. The other thing is, if you play any sports or you do anything that requires you to jump, then strong hip flexors are incredibly important, because being able to extend through the hips with power and pace is what allows you to jump higher and jump with more explosivity. So again, this exercise would help. So there's no real downside to this, other than the fact that if you just did this and you did nothing else to balance it, anything else out round about it, you weren't working on your hamstrings or your glutes, you weren't working on mobility, then this alone might not be the best thing in the world. But in conjunction with these other things, it's definitely something to look at. So the exercise we're going to look at today is simply a hip flexion exercise. I'm going to use a resistance band, a mini band, hip band. But you can also use a kettlebell, but keep it very light. So you're looking for like a 4 kilo kettlebell probably at the most, and you just hook it around your foot and you're driving your knee up. With this, we're going to hook one round one foot, or we're going to hook it around both feet, and then we're going to keep one foot planted and drive the other leg up. Now I'm just going to do it standing in the middle of the room. If you need some support, then grab onto a chair, grab onto a wall or something like that. The main thing is to try and keep your torso still. And the other thing I would maybe recommend, that if this is really an area for you that you really find difficult to focus in on, stand with your back against a wall, because then you can't sort of throw your body into it and cheat that way. So I'll show you what I mean. So you can see there, it's a pretty simple exercise. All you need is a resistance against the elevation of your foot, but then just trying to make sure that you don't kick with your whole body, that you're just driving your knee up, flexing the hip, and that's what's driving the knee elevated up to a 90-degree angle. Control it back down again, do it again. It's as simple as that, really. As I say, you can add resistance to this by tightening the band. You can add resistance by adding more weight onto the kettlebell that you're using. You could use cables for this. But I would recommend that you don't let your ego get away from you in this. All you're trying to do is create a little stimulus into the area. You're not looking to try and overload it. Yes, you might be able to do it with a 16 kilo kettlebell. That doesn't make it good. So give it a shot, see how you get on. If you've got any issues, come back to me and we'll see what we can do. Bye for now.